Welcome to an interview in history. Imagine a podcast that serves as a bridge across time, connecting listeners to the voices of history's most impactful figures. Each episode is a deep dive into the lives and legacies of these individuals, exploring not just their well-documented achievements, but also uncovering lesser-known facts that shaped their contributions to our world. From scientists who unlocked the mysteries of the universe to activists who fought for social change, each story is a testament to the indelible mark they left on society. This journey through history will not only educate, but also inspire listeners to appreciate the intricate tapestry of human progress. Hi, I'm Steve Burig, the host of An Interview in History. This week, we'll be talking with Edgar Allan Poe, who is an American writer, poet, editor, and literary critic who's best known for his poetry and short stories, particularly his tales involving mystery and the macabre. He is widely regarded as one of the central figures of Romanticism and Gothic fiction in the United States and of early American literature. This interview takes place on November 20th, 1848. Welcome, Mr. Poe, and thank you for joining us. Let's start by talking about your early family life. Could you tell us about your parents and upbringing?
Please, let's not be so formal. Call me Edgar. Yes, my family life was rather tragic, I'm afraid. I was born on January 19, 1809 in Boston. My parents, David and Elizabeth Poe, were actors. My mother was quite a talented actress, well loved by many. But my father, he was not so fortunate in his career. Sadly, both of my parents died before I turned 3. My mother succumbed to tuberculosis, a common but ruthless killer in those days. My father had already abandoned us by then, and his fate remains somewhat uncertain.
Thank you, Edgar. That's truly heartbreaking. So, what happened to you and your siblings after their passing?
My siblings and I were separated. My elder brother, William Henry Leonard Poe, went to live with my paternal grandparents. My younger sister, Rosalie, was taken in by another family in Richmond. As for myself, I was fortunate to be taken in by the Allan family, a wealthy couple in Richmond, Virginia. Although they never formally adopted me, they gave me their name. Thus I became Edgar Allan Poe. My foster father, John Allan, was a prosperous merchant, while my foster mother, Frances, was kind and loving toward me.
It must have been difficult growing up apart from your siblings. Did you stay in touch with them?
Indeed, it was a challenge. I was particularly fond of my brother Henry. He shared my love for literature, but he, too, suffered from a melancholy disposition. Unfortunately, he died at the age of 24, also from tuberculosis. My sister Rosalie lived a long life, but was said to have struggled with her mental faculties. It's a cruel thing, being separated from one's family.
I can only imagine. Edgar, let's shift a bit to your education. You were known to be quite brilliant in your youth. Can you tell us more about your schooling?
I had a rather tumultuous education. The Allans sent me to some of the finest schools in England while they were living there. I studied in a boarding school in Stoke Newington near London, where I became quite the Latin scholar. Later, I returned to Richmond and eventually attended the University of Virginia. I excelled in my studies there, particularly in Latin and French. However, my time at university was cut short due to financial troubles. I took to gambling in a vain attempt to pay my debts, which only worsened my situation. My foster father, John Allan, refused to settle my debts, and we quarreled. Thus, I had to leave the university after only a year.
That must have been difficult. How did your strained relationship with John Allan affect your later life?
It had quite a significant impact. After our falling out, I found myself in need of means to support myself. So I enlisted in the United States Army under an assumed name. I did well there, even achieving the rank of sergeant major. But my ambitions were always literary, and eventually I sought a discharge to attend West Point, hoping to gain a formal education that would please Mr. Allan. Sadly, our reconciliation did not last. I was court-martialed and dismissed from West Point for deliberately neglecting my duties. It was my way of rebelling, I suppose. Let's talk about your literary journey. When did you first begin writing, and what inspired your early works? I had a passion for the written word from a young age. My first collection of poems, entitled Timberlane and Other Poems, was published in 1827, though it garnered little attention at the time. My aspirations have always leaned toward the melancholic and macabre. I suppose my own sorrows and losses influenced my themes. I was drawn to exploring the darker aspects of human nature, the fears and anxieties that lurk in shadows. My fascination with death and the afterlife and the supernatural certainly shaped my storytelling. Your works certainly capture that eerie, gothic atmosphere. Speaking of which, can you tell us about your relationship with Virginia Clem, your wife?
My dear Virginia. She was my cousin, you see, and we were married when she was only 13 and I was 27. Our union was one of both love and necessity. Virginia was frail, but she had a sweet and gentle disposition. I loved her dearly, but her health was always precarious. She became ill with tuberculosis, the very disease that claimed my mother and brother. Those years were fraught with anxiety as I watched her slowly waste away. I poured my grief into my writing, hoping to find some solace.
It's said that Virginia was the inspiration for some of your most famous works, like Annabel Lee and The Raven. Is that true?
Yes, indeed. Virginia was my muse. Annabel Lee was a tribute to her, a poem of love and loss that still lingers even after death. As for The Raven, it was born from my exploration of mourning and despair. The loss of a loved one is a profound agony that I've known all too well, and it's that raw emotion that I sought to capture in my writings.
Okay, let's go back to your life as a writer then. How was it trying to make a living from your craft in those times?
It was no easy feat, I assure you. I struggled with poverty most of my life. I worked as an editor and literary critic for various magazines, but the pay was meager. I was often at odds with publishers and editors, as I was known to be quite scathing in my reviews. My work was either praised for its originality or condemned for its darkness. The Raven brought me a bit of fame, but not much fortune. On January 29, 1845, my poem, The Raven, appeared in the Evening Mirror and quickly became a popular sensation. It made me a household name almost instantly, but oddly enough, I was only paid $9 for its publication. It's one thing to be recognized and quite another to be compensated for one's art.
Did you have any children with Virginia?
No, we did not. Virginia's health was always too fragile. I often wonder what it would have been like to be a father, but it was not to be.
Edgar, what do you deem as your greatest work?
Difficult question indeed. Every artist has his particular fondness for different works over time. Yet, if I were to name the piece I consider my greatest, I might lean towards The Raven. It was accumulation of all I sought to achieve in poetry: melancholy, musicality, and a lingering sense of the sublime. The poem brought me a degree of fame, not much fortune, and its haunting refrain of nevermore seems to resonate with readers' deepest fears and sorrows. But then there is The Fall of the House of Usher, a tale that encapsulates the terror of the mind and the decay of both body and soul. The blending of atmosphere, psychological depth, and gothic horror in a story that is something I'm particularly proud of. It is more than just a tale of terror. It's a reflection of human condition and the inevitable decline that awaits us all. In truth, I believe my greatest work is not a single poem or story, but rather the creation of a lasting legacy in a genre of Gothic literature. My explorations of the macabre and the mysterious and the melancholic have, I hope, opened doors for future writers to explore the darker recesses of human psyche. I know there have been various opinions of your work by the critics. Can you give me your take on that? The critics. A source of both delight and despair throughout my career. My relationship with them was as tumultuous as my life itself. Opinions on my work were quite polarized. Some lauded my originality and mastery of the Gothic and macabre, while others dismissed my stories as mere sensationalism. When The Raven was published in 1845, it received widespread acclaim, almost immediately capturing the public's imagination. Critics praised its haunting atmosphere, musical quality, and the way it delved into the depths of grief and madness. It brought me a taste of the fame that I had long sought, though, regrettably, not much in terms of financial reward. Nevertheless, it remains my most celebrated work among critics and readers alike. However, not all of my writings were met with such enthusiasm. My tales of horror, such as The Telltale Heart and The Black Cat, were seen by some as overly grotesque and morbid. Critics who favored more traditional storytelling often found my fascination with death, madness, and the supernatural to be distasteful, labeling it vulgar or depraved. They accused me of appealing to base instincts, of using horror merely to shock rather than to convey deeper meaning. Yet I believe that horror, when wielded thoughtfully, could reveal profound truths about the human condition. My work as a literary critic also put me at odds with many of my contemporaries. I was known for my sharp, uncompromising reviews. Some appreciated my candid assessments and keen eye for literary excellence, while others saw me as overly harsh and even vindictive. My critique of Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, accusing him of plagiarism, for example, did little to endear me to the literary elite of the time. As for my more ambitious prose, like Eureka, an essay in which I explored the nature of the universe, it was perhaps too far ahead of its time. Critics were baffled by its mixture of philosophy, science, and poetic imagination, dismissing it as the ramblings of a madman. Yet, in my heart, I believed it to be my most profound and visionary work. In the end, the critical reception to my writing was a mirror of my life, marked by moments of brilliance and acclaim, yet equally overshadowed by misunderstanding and harsh judgment. I often found myself an outcast in literary circles, praised by some and scorned by others. But I took solace in the knowing that my work, though divisive, would one day endure beyond the fleeting opinions of my critics. Didn't I read somewhere that you attempted to secure a position in the administration of John Tyler? Indeed, I hope to be appointed to the United States Custom House in Philadelphia with help from President Tyler's son Robert, who was an acquaintance of my friend Frederick Thomas. However, I failed to appear for a meeting with Thomas to discuss the appointment in mid-September 1842. I claimed to have been sick, though Thomas believed that I had been drunk. I was promised an appointment, but all positions were eventually filled by others. Edgar, I understand you alienated yourself from other writers. Why? I alienated myself because I publicly accused Henry Wadsworth Longfellow of plagiarism, though Longfellow never responded. I later amended my accusations by expressing my belief that many writers, having absorbed ideas from others in the past, often confuse the source of their ideas with their original thoughts. But most of my contemporaries found that interpretation incomprehensible and continued to be antagonistic towards me. I became known as the creator of a type of fiction that was difficult to categorize and nearly impossible to imitate. I was one of the first American authors in the 19th century to become more popular in Europe than in the United States. I was particularly esteemed in France, in part due to early translations of my work by Charles Boudarde. Boudarde's translations became definitive renditions of my work in continental Europe. In your later years, you seem to be plagued by personal demons. What was that time like for you? Those were indeed dark days. After Virginia's death in 1847, I was consumed by grief. I turned to drink, as I'd done before, though it only worsened my troubles. My health deteriorated, and I wandered from city to city, often in search of work or solace. I attempted to start a literary magazine of my own, but it never came to fruition. My life was a cycle of brief successes followed by crushing defeats. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us, Edgar. Your legacy continues to captivate readers around the world. The pleasure was mine. I'm content knowing that my words will live on, even after I'm gone. Edgar Allan Poe's death is a question that has puzzled many. He was found delirious on the streets of Baltimore in October of 1849, wearing clothes that were not his own. Poe was in great distress and in need of immediate assistance, according to Joseph W. Walker, who found him. He was taken to Washington Medical College, where he died on Sunday, October 7, 1849, at 5 a.m. To this day, the cause of death remains uncertain. Some say it was alcohol, others claim it was illness, perhaps even foul play. I suppose it is fitting that his end should be as mysterious as the tales he wrote. Since his death, he and his writings have appeared throughout popular culture in such fields as art, photography, literary allusions, music, motion pictures, and television. Several of his homes are dedicated museums. In addition, the Mystery Writers of America presents an annual Edgar Award for distinguished work in the mystery genre. And now, another forgotten history. Hans Christian Andersen, born on April 7, 1805 in Odense, Denmark, is celebrated for his fairy tales, including the beloved story, The Ugly Duckling. Andersen's early life was marked by significant hardship. He was the son of a shoemaker and a washerwoman, and his family lived in extreme poverty. This challenging upbringing often forced him to beg for food and shelter, sometimes finding refuge under a bridge. Despite his difficult childhood, Andersen harbored dreams of greatness. He believed he was not merely the son of a shoemaker, but the illegitimate child of Prince Christian Frederick, who later became Christian VIII of Denmark. As a boy, Andersen was tall, awkward, and often bullied, suffering from the mockery of his peers due to his appearance and aspirations. He dreamed of being an opera singer and an actor, yet faced rejection at every turn. However, his perseverance eventually paid off as he found his true calling as a writer. The metaphor of the ugly duckling closely mirrors Andersen's own experiences, depicting the journey of an awkward duckling who grows into a beautiful swan. Historians believe that prior to writing this tale, Andersen discovered something that sparked the belief in his noble lineage, further enriching the metaphor of transformation and self-acceptance. Throughout his life, Andersen remained committed to his art, ultimately achieving fame and acclaim for his fairy tales. He passed away on August 4, 1875 in Copenhagen, leaving behind a legacy of timeless stories that continue to inspire readers worldwide. Andersen once remarked that he had already penned his autobiography in the form of The Ugly Duckling, highlighting the deep connection between his life and his work.
Join us next week for something a little different as we talk about the first Thanksgiving. Until then, take care.